So for this video, really what we're trying to do is to brainstorm and generate some ideas and think about some of the things that you could possibly do and write about for the first assignment, that visual narrative essay. So what I'd like you to do in this video is I'm going to ask a series of questions, and after I ask those questions, I'm going to pause for a couple seconds, but you can certainly feel free to hit the pause on your video player, on your computer, and then take that time to go ahead and respond and write and do the things you need to do for those specific questions. And in terms of generating some ideas, I'm going to encapsulate this through what's called the Five Canons of Rhetoric. Throughout the open discussion and the forums, we're going to probably talk more about what is rhetoric and what does it mean and how is that term skewed and how does it apply to the things that we're doing. I don't want you to worry about those things too much right now, but I'll go through and give you some definitions as to what those five canons of rhetoric are as they relate to some of the things that you're doing, and then again have those questions, and hopefully that's going to scaffold and build what you might be able to do for the first assignment. Okay. So again, feel free to pause the video at any point. I'm going to kind of go through these things relatively quickly, but you can, again, feel free to stop, pause, take the time to write, and then continue to play the video. So the first canon of rhetoric, again, there are five. They're invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. And so the first one is invention. And invention is really just that idea of the process of finding something to say. What is it that you want to say? What is it you want to write about? How are you going to go about doing that? Okay, and in terms of generating some ideas and figuring out what it is you want to say, there are certain activities that we do. It could be brainstorming, it could be free writing, it could be just discussing things with classmates, with peers, with whomever in your life. Okay, so we've done a little bit of this invention with one of the earlier writing exercises, which again was just trying to get you to think about some things and using writing as an avenue towards thinking. But we really want to refine our focus here and think about what you're going to be doing for that first assignment. So again, we're going to have a couple of questions here. I want you to pause the video and answer these questions, do this activity, and hopefully it'll get you started. Okay. So the first thing is really just taking a moment to list on a piece of paper, or again in your word processors, people, events, or places that you feel have been significant in your life or changed your life in some sort of way. So again, at this point, we're just listing. You don't have to worry about writing anything out or making complete sentences. Just really kind of create a bulleted list here. Okay, so I'll give you a minute to do that. The next thing is that after you've made your list, I want you to check items that seem particularly vivid in your mind. So if you were to recall them, could you recall the sounds? Could you recall the sense of smell? Could you recall certain tactile things, right? It seems particularly vivid in your mind. And so just in that list you made, make little check marks next to the things that seem particularly vivid. And next, of those things that you checked, think about the significance of those choices. So in a very short, sentence or two, under those things that you checked, why are the persons or the places or the events that you've chosen so important to you? So just kind of a quick little sentence that you have maybe for that. Next, I want you to pick one item from your list. And again, you're not bound to this item. It's not necessarily going to be the thing that you will write the paper on, and that's okay, but this is just an exercise to maybe help get you going. But pick one item from the list, and what did that item mean to you when it happened? And what about now? So maybe the event happened to you when you were a teenager, and so at that particular point in your life, it really meant something to you. But maybe now you have some perspective, you have some time and some distance. So what does it mean to you now? And how has that person, place, thing, event shaped you into the person that you are today? And the last thing is to really just start writing. There's all different kinds of ways that folks go about writing. Whether you're a bricklayer kind of person where you really, before you can get on to the next sentence or paragraph, you have to make sure every single word is right. Some folks just kind of, for lack of a better term, word vomit and put everything on the page and then sort of sift through it all later. Whatever you're comfortable with doing, but really just trying to get you to start writing. And writing as descriptively as you can, okay? Um, Try not to worry about it being, particularly clean or neat, grammatically correct, any of that kind of stuff. Just really try to get the description and the thoughts and the ideas down. And when I say descriptive, again, give us a real sense of tactileness, right? If you say that something was rough, well, what does that mean, right? Can you tell us more about what the texture is? What do you mean by rough? Because again, that's a really subjective term that could mean something different to different people. Okay, so just take a few moments and try to write as descriptively as you can about that item that you selected. Okay, the next thing we're going to move on to is arrangement. Okay, now typically arrangement is something you worry about after maybe you've already started writing and the drafting process and trying to organize things. But really, quite simply, arrangement is the way that your writing is put into an order, the way it is literally arranged. Specifically, is your writing arranged in such a way that the reader can understand what you're trying to accomplish, right? So in the case of most academic essays, papers, there's some type of an introduction, right, that introduces us to the thoughts, the ideas, the significance, the background maybe of what it is that we're discussing. In this case, in a narrative piece, it's the start of a story. Interestingly, a lot of times, at least in the case of myself and a lot of writers that I know, you don't always start with the introduction, right? Because you're trying to figure out what you want to say first, and then you go back to the introduction afterward to really give us a sense of the topic. So you don't necessarily have to start with an introduction. In this case, you're again going to be starting with a story, and that story could maybe begin in the middle of something, and that's okay. But we want to get a sense of where does your essay want to go. So here's what I want you to do again: is answer a couple of questions. Where does your essay go? Are you going to start at chronologically in the beginning of the event and leading us up to it, and we have this big sort of climactic thing that happens? We're going to start right after some big event or action happens. So we're going to get a lot of backstory. Think a little bit about the arrangement when you first start. So do you start with a story, for example, or are you going to move chronologically through? So give us a sense of that arrangement. Okay, so take a few minutes to answer that. Now, style. Again, style is something you tend to worry about perhaps a little bit later on in the drafting or editing or revising process, and all those terms mean slightly different things. But this is really how you express yourself, the way that you write in order to convey some sort of message to a reader. And so yes, it does have to deal with sentence level things and issues, so using second person you, for example, comma usage, whether you use first person, misspellings, wordiness, sure, all that stuff plays into style. But it's also your use of language. So you can think about style again in terms of, am I being descriptive enough? Am I using enough details? Can the reader really see what it is I'm talking about? It's one thing to say that, the sky is blue outside, using a typical cliche as an example. But how can you say that in a way that's more descriptive and new, right? Or that it's gray and it's cloudy outside, and you would say more like it looked like an elongated mirror, or some sort of new way of thinking about it or looking at it or describing it to get us to see it in a new way. So the next thing I want you to do, we've done the invention process, we've done a little bit talking about arrangement. In terms of style, identify one or two sections of the in-class writing, that we just did, where you provide more sensory details. So you might feel like, okay, I started providing a little bit of details, can you provide even more? Really making that description rich and thick, okay? So take out some lines or phrases from a paragraph. So for example, so this is just one type of example. Now I know why my father spent all the sweat in multiple jobs, working countless hours diligently. Okay, so maybe that's what you started with. And that's, descriptive in a sense, right? But it is telling us a little bit. You could expand upon that line, showing the reader how hard your father worked. The trickle of sweat dripping off his nose and onto the factory machine. The callus on his hands that you noticed as he helped you with your homework, even after having worked all day. You see how there's another layer of description to that, okay, and detail to that. So taking some of the things out of what you've already written and providing even more sensory details, more of those smells, those textures, the things that you've heard. So take a few minutes to do that. Memory, we primarily used to be an oral culture, right? We passed down our traditions and our norms and our stories uh, orally for a really long time throughout history, and so much so that they had to be memorized. And now there's less of that idea of memorization. But and that's primarily because of technology and those kinds of things. Memory is seen as less important. But there are some important questions relating to memory, or perhaps a better way of framing it is making something memorable. Okay, so thinking of what you're trying to write or what you're trying to accomplish, whether it's visually or the written component, is what could you do to make your essay, to make your visual memorable to somebody? Where if they say, I read this piece, what would they really pull out of it that's memorable to them? And how can you draw upon the emotions of an audience? And there's using another rhetorical term called pathos, the emotions, the connection with the audience emotionally, in order to get them to identify with you, your experience. Okay, so what emotions could you draw upon? So think about those, answer those questions for a second. And lastly, delivery. I won't go into too much with this. Delivery really is, this is a form of delivery right here, right? I'm delivering this message to you via online, via using video and screen capture. That's a delivery method, okay? It's really the manner in which you present the information. So whether it's giving an oral presentation, whether you're writing a paper, whether you're handing in a PowerPoint to me, whatever it is it submitted electronically? Is it printed out? It could also be the appropriate formats, right? So is it MLA, is it APA, those kinds of things. So not really questions to think about in terms of delivery, but something that you do have to consider sometimes when you're considering an audience and the way in which you're writing. So those are the 5 canons of rhetoric in brief, and also as they might pertain to generating some things for what you might do for that first assignment. So again, before you start drafting the visual narrative essay, go through this exercise. Take the time, again, pause the video as you're going along. Hopefully you were doing that. And you can rewatch the video. You can go back and look at these questions at any time to try to really get a sense. As always, you have questions, you have concerns, feel free to contact me and email me. Okay? Thank you so much.